Council will call the meeting to order. For the record, it is January 29th, 2024 at 6:01 PM. We'll begin this joint meeting with roll call attendance. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Cavanagh.
Here.
Councilwoman Little Roberts. Here. Councilman Taylor.
Here.
Councilman Overton.
Here.
Councilwoman Strader.
Here.
Councilman Borton.
Here.
Mayor Simison.
Here. And for ACHD.
We're all present.
Okay, excellent. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. And it is a fair amount of presentations this evening. So hopefully this format works for what we hope to accomplish, is get an update and get an opportunity to engage with one another. What we'll do is we'll just go ahead and I will go ahead and just recognize people throughout. Don't need to take turns. Just raise your hand whether you're online or in person. And we will go ahead and operate that way for our time. So, Commission President, do you have any comments you'd like to say before we get going?
Just thank you for the opportunity to be here with all of you today, and looking forward to not only the presentations, but hopefully answering questions and any other insights or conversation that follows. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. So first up is adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
we adopt the agenda as published.
Councilman Borton has moved to adopt the agenda as published. Do we have a second?
Second the motion.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and the agenda is adopted. So first item up is the Linder Road Idaho Transportation Department grant. We will be hearing from Mr. Hood and Mr. McCarthy, is my understanding. Mr. Hood.
Good evening. Mr. Mayor, President Pickering, council members, commissioners. My name is Caleb Hood. I am the Deputy Director of Community Development part here in the city. And I've been working with Brian McCarthy over the last couple of months on this project that we're going to give you an update on this evening, the Linder Road Overlander Franklin project. It does include an overpass of Interstate 84, which we're pretty excited about. We're also here to celebrate, as the agenda states, we did receive as a city, we received $4.3 million through ITD for their strategic initiatives grant. So we're pretty excited about that. And again, we'll get into a little of those details, but maybe just to orient you all and some of the reason why this is an important project for the city. We've been advocating for this project for several years now with Compass, with ACHD and other transportation partners in the region. Once the overpass is constructed, Linder Road will be about 33 miles long, connecting the Snake River to the foothills just north of Eagle. So really a regionally significant project. And I know that means something different depending on what room you're in and what agency you're working with, but really this is going to be the longest arterial in the county once it's constructed. So again, pretty excited about it. We've been trying to identify funding sources for several years, working again on getting this project in the TIP, the STIP, and the integrated 5-year work plan. In 2020, the mayor did set up a task force that's been meeting about every other month over the last few years, excuse me. It includes members from the business community, school district, our emergency service providers, because there's a whole bunch of benefit with schools and fire stations and just neighborhood connectivity in the general vicinity of this project. Here's the limits of the project. So again, between Overland and Franklin Road with some intersection improvements. I'll let Brian get into some of those details on where design's at these days and some of the nitty-gritty there. But in 2021, the city council budgeted $2.5 million to kickstart the project and move it into design. That investment really helped us win the grant with ITD. We applied for 10 million, but we'll take 4.3 and put that to good use. Really, again, want to thank ACHD for allowing Mr. McCarthy and others at the Highway District to project manage the design. It's been a really good experience for me, and I think the city to have your involvement and coordination with ITD and knowing how they operate. So that's been very valuable from the city's perspective. But to have that shelf ready I heard that from ITD staff. To have that shelf ready and the design almost done really helped us get those monies to move towards construction and right of way. We do have an interagency agreement that allowed, again, ACHD sources to work with Keller and Associates. And again, Brian will provide some more information on where they're at in design. But we will likely look at modifying the interagency agreement we currently have that takes the up to $2.5 million and maybe modify that, really looking at the city contributing our portion, again, to make this project move to construction. So I think with that, Brian has some updates on actual design of the project. As he's coming up, I'll just kind of leave this. That task force I was mentioning, really our role through some of that task force was to not only advocate for the project, but maybe look at some thematic examples with it being sandwiched between Meridian and 10 Mile, kind of thinking of maybe what some of the form liners could look like, some of the concrete, some of the landscaping, and some of the other elements that maybe have aesthetic and traffic value, including those in the project. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brian.
Thank you, Caleb. As Caleb mentioned, I am Brian McCarthy, a project management supervisor at ACHD, and I am managing the Linda Road Overpass project. As he mentioned, it's a partnership project between the City of Meridian, ACHD, and ITD, with the Idaho Transportation Department, a team member overseeing the overpass as it's crossing 84 and ultimately responsible for the ownership of the overpass. Little background on where we've come so far on design. We have completed the concept design in the fall of last year. We've completed the 75% design review, and at that point was when we had the first public involvement effort with the concept design. The second large public involvement effort was just this past October with the 75% design review. And currently, right now, the team is reviewing the 95% design submittal. We expect to have final design complete in April, at which time we'll proceed into the right-of-way phase. Some details on what we have so far, and all these displays that I'm sharing were available to the public during the online open house and all the public outreach that we did. These are all on our website. If you'd like to see some more information on there, it's all on the website. This rendering is looking at the overpass, looking to the south, so standing on the north side of 84 and looking towards the south. A couple things I wanted to point out was, if you notice between the travelway and the multi-use pathway, we have a pedestrian wall separating the vehicles from the multi-use pathway, which will be used for the pedestrians and the cyclists. You may notice on one side we have a retaining wall on the north side, while on the south side we have a fill slope. And the reason for that was to try and preserve as much space of available property on the north side based on all the subdivisions that are built out on the north side and potential future development there as well. While the south side, there was quite a bit of right-of-way preservation where we had the space for that large fill slope. Again, you can see the wall in this rendering a little bit better. That pedestrian wall is continuing all the way down. It's on the overpass, but it's also continuing all the way down for the approaches until you touch down on regular ground. The overview here, I chose this location specifically to see kind of a typical section of the 5 lanes, so 2 lanes in each direction with the center turn lane. However, in that center turn lane, where it's not required for left turn movements, we're utilizing a median island that the city is interested in landscaping. So we will be having the median island with landscaping, and also landscaping in the buffered area between the curb and the multi-use pathway. There's a 5-foot buffer in that strip, so the blue area there on the aerial, that the city is also looking to landscape that buffered area. I also want to point out Verbena Drive. So we are realigning Verbena Drive based on the grade change. Currently, where Verbena Drive enters in at Linda Road, it'll be about a 7-foot grade differential. So we are realigning Verbena Drive to line up with the east side of Verbena as well. I also want to point out you can see here on the top of the screen, a couple of these houses that are pretty close to the roadway. There are a few properties that are pretty heavily impacted with this project that we're working with directly on those property owners currently. And we actually, as of last week, the commission approved the purchase of one of the full acquisition properties impacted by the new overpass. Extending down through Overland Road, so the project, it's not stopping at Overland, it's actually continuing all the way through to the south side of the intersection. The reason for that is to allow for the continuous multi-use pathway. Rather than terminating it at Overland Road, it will continue all the way through Overland down Linder and connect into some existing and future proposed multi-use pathways on Linder Road. At Waltman Street, we're installing a pedestrian hybrid beacon, and this is one of 2 pedestrian hybrid beacons that will be within the project location. The other one is at Greenhead. And as mentioned, we did 2 major rounds of public involvement, and these are the results from the most recent one, which was in October of 2023, which was the 75% design. Many of the displays that I showed here were available for the viewing and comment. 73.1% of the 208 responses were in favor of the project. That was comparatively to the concept public involvement that we had. It was at 69% were in favor. So it actually went up with this additional round of public involvement. And we feel like some of that has to do with the enhancements that we did to the pedestrian and multi-use pathway, such as the pedestrian wall and also carrying it all the way through to Overland intersection. Next steps for design, we are currently reviewing the 95% design submittal, and then we expect the final submittal in April with, we'll be starting the right-of-way phase shortly after that. We actually already began the right-of-way phase on some of these parcels that are full buyouts. Money for that is programmed in 24 and 25, and then we are looking to construct in 2026 and 2027. As mentioned before, Idaho Transportation Department will be responsible for the overpass and responsible for the cost tied to the overpass.
And to that point, again, we're working with ITD to find roughly $4 or $5 million to match the $4 million grant so they can pony up the rest of the bridge costs to make the overpass actually happen. So again, I'm encouraged they're having those conversations in that division. Again, working on how then our 3 agencies can work together to make this project move forward. We had just our first conversation last week as the city of Meridian was just received our letter and draft MOU from ITD to review and sign. So there are some terms of that we're still talking about, but fully intend to execute that MOU with ITD and continue the conversations between our 3 agencies to figure out what the next steps are to keep this project moving forward. So I don't believe we really have any questions for you this evening, but more a project status update and kind of next steps and some good news. So with that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Council, Commission, questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner President Pickering.
I just want to commend staff and the leadership on the council, but more importantly, for getting this far, first of all. But the second piece is how important your guys' partnership on the landscape element of those medians and those buffers, because that's going to, by widening this roadway and developing that overpass, folks are going to be coming down really fast, right? So to make sure folks are going the speed limit, that type of landscape median is going to help a lot and provide some safety factors. So I just want to say thank you for putting that forward and working with us on that. That's a key piece of this.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner McKinney.
quick question regarding the public feedback and the information that you showed there. Among those who didn't like the concept design, is there kind of a common thread for why they didn't like it? I'm just curious to know about that.
Yeah, Commissioner, it was pretty clear when you read through all the comments that people that live directly in the neighborhood north of 84 or, along Linder Road tended to have the more negative feedback that we received for both rounds of public involvement. Currently it's a dead end on Linder Road, so the additional traffic that would come through the roadway, road noise, impacts to properties, those were more of the negative feedback that we received.
Mr. Mayor?
Commissioner Henson.
Yeah, so I have a question that would be for the whole council and the mayor and staff, and that's because this obviously has an impact on another Linder project, which is north of Franklin, which we're currently spending resources to decide, what the best options are. But I think there's a larger question. The corridor itself, which you've described, Caleb, as being the longest arterial, will be the longest arterial because there's a future investment to widening of the Linder Bridge over the river to really see this as a mobility corridor for motor vehicles. That sort of largely decides how it's going to, what the view of the city is of what Linder will be, both with the design of this bridge and the design of the river bridge. Rather than thinking of Linder as being more of what portions of it are right now, which is a residential arterial. So I guess that's my question. Have we already pre-decided, or is there a preference for making sure that does function as one of the longest arterials, a mobility corridor arterial? And that will save us a lot of heartache as we look at different options. As we are looking at different options on Linder, if clearly Meridian City wants this to be a mobility corridor that goes all the way from the river to well south of the freeway.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'll maybe give that a first go. This one. And then obviously I don't speak for all of council. I will, Commissioner Hanson, just let you know though, the council did receive an update from Brook Green just within about a month ago, I guess now at this point. So there was no discussions of council on if their city has a preferred 3 or 5 or 5 with shared roads. Some of council, I would assume, took the survey as the rest of the public did, if you're referring to the segment, I imagine, north of Pine, between Pine and Ustick. From our standpoint, though, again, broadly, the city's looked at that corridor as being, yes, a mobility corridor for multiple modes. You have Eagle, there's recreating in the foothills, there's Eagle Island State Park, there's several places to shop along the corridor. So I think it is a corridor we look at that can function, again, for multiple modes, bikes, pedestrians, and cars. And if the question is, I think there's some question and concern, as I'm sure you have, on 3 versus 5 in that segment, because it's pretty constrained. But it is, again, a regional corridor. So I think that's something that we definitely want the connection at the interstate, first and foremost, and then maybe looking at the actual cross-section with community feedback from some of those surveys too.
Thanks, Mayor. And I would just encourage the council to look at it and give us some much deeper feedback. Also take a look at the history. The attempt was made on Curtis for a segment that had housing a number of years ago, but because it's such a short segment, inviting people to have Curtis function as a mobility corridor and then constrain it down and attempt to try and do a lot of things in one space and then widen it back out again at Chinden, it didn't work. And so I think the reality is we have to get a stronger sense of where Meridian is before we go too much further in the development of that segment, simply because of the way in which we're designing this project that we're looking at today.
I'll take a shot at it, and I think some of this maybe comes wrapped up into the next dialogue, the next item on the agenda. At least from my personal perspective, and I I have a viewpoint on what all arterials should be preserved for moving forward. I understand when you have something already developed, it creates a unique challenge through that, but I don't think it changes the intent. So how do you, at least from my perspective, get to the intent of the arterial network despite the challenges that currently exist with the built homes in that area? That's my short way of saying we'll wait till the next one and give you my full feedback, but that's at least my feedback on the personal feedback on the concept. But council obviously hasn't weighed in fully from their viewpoint since we had that initial conversation. Council, anyone else like to provide direct feedback to that question? Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments on this topic? All right. Thank you very much. And Mr. Hood, we'll let you stay there to bring up the next item, which is McMillan Road 3-lane to 5-lane preservation.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and ACHD Commission. Maybe just to put a bow on that last topic a little bit as we transition to this, as you alluded to, Mr. Mayor, there is some relational issues with this topic and even the Linda Road corridor. Prior to Ms. Green taking her leave, we did coordinate, and when she gets back here in the spring, she will come back to council. And I fully anticipate that's where some more direct feedback will occur. Again, after we have seen the summary from the public, have more data and more information, I do anticipate I don't know if it's gonna be an action item necessarily, but there'll be a more robust discussion, I'm sure, of the council when Ms. Green is able to come back and do a follow-up on the Linda Road concept study. So transitioning then to McMillan Road and some other corridors. Again, I'm still Caleb Hood here with the city. I coordinated with Mr. Justin Lucas. There he is in the way back. Doesn't want to be associated with me, but I did talk to him. He's here to answer any technical questions on some of the things that I may say regarding to like master street map or CIP or integrated 5-year work plan, those types of things. So he's here. I don't have too many slides on this one. This one really is more of a dialogue, I think, than slides. But I will just put up something to look at so you don't have to stare at me the whole time. So McMillan is generally in the middle of your screens just to orient you to the McMillan corridor. Last summer, the city did send a letter to ACHD with some concerns about McMillan near the State Highway 16 project. Originally, McMillan was planned to go over State Highway 16, and then ITD flipped that, and now McMillan is going under, and there will be an overpass. State Highway 16 will be an overpass, and the plans only had an 80-foot span and still do have an 80-foot span. I know it's hard to see in a PowerPoint. On the bottom, you can kind of see the dimension there. There's 80-foot clear between the MSE walls there. And that caused us concern when we saw the revised plans that showed that. So we sent a letter to you and talked to ITD both and said, hey, someday we'd like to preserve maybe 5 lanes going, in this case, under State Highway 16. So for years, Meridian has advocated for the preservation of McMillan Road for more than the 2 lanes that it generally is in Meridian for much of Meridian today. While the city understands the constraints of widening McMillan, I don't know, again, how familiar you all are with McMillan, but there's a canal that runs along a good portion of this, as well as the large Idaho power poles. And they even cross at some of the intersections. So some portions you have them both on the same side, but most of the corridor you have one on one side, and so a canal on one side and the large power poles on the other. So very constrained corridor. But it is a detour route. As you can see, Chinden and the old state highway U-stick. So it does get used, and there's more and more traffic, and our city limits are growing along McMillan, and we don't see that changing. So preserving for its long-term functionality is really the concern there. Some opportunities have already been lost for some right-of-way preservation along McMillan. However, the opportunity still exists adjacent to underdeveloped properties and towards the county line. So as you can see, if it's not in color here, those properties are still unannexed and unincorporated Ada County today, but within Meridian's area of city impact. We've done a pretty good job of preserving access along this corridor, mostly subdivision entrances, public roads coming into to subdivisions that align. So done a pretty good job, unlike Fairview that has 99 access points in a mile in some segments. There really are some of these segments that only have 3 or 4 driveways or roadway intersections. So that comes into play where you may not even need to do 5 lanes in some of the corridors. Maybe you can even get away with 4 because you don't have the turning movements, left ins and whatnot on a lot of the corridor. I'm not trying to design it here from the podium, but just saying right-of-way preservation, and maybe you don't have to do 5 lanes and blow everything out because you really don't need to have, again, a center turn lane or even the landscape medians in the middle of it. McMillan isn't the only section line arterial we'd like to see preserved for future widening. In fact, Meridian's request this evening is that all section line arterials in our planning area be preserved for 100 feet of total right-of-way unless we both agree, unless both of our agencies agree that something more or less is appropriate. So what you see here is the planned lanes on the master street map, ACHD's master street map. There are some 3s and some 7s, but a majority are 5. And that's what, again, we'd like the starting point to be 5 unless we coordinate something differently. So there are some additional coordinations that I kind of mentioned in my opening remarks. Certainly there's some impacts, right, to plans and programs. So we'd like to just have that conversation with staff. I would be more than happy to work through some of the logistics of what that means to, again, CIPs and whatnot. But at a very high level, that is Meridian's request, is that we preserve 100 feet and figure out design later for the section line arterial roads in Meridian. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I will stand for any questions, comments, feedback.
Thank you, Caleb. Council, commission, questions? Comments? Councilman Borton.
Before I get to that, Brian, I'd like to say thank you. I've heard lots of good topics, lots of good comments. I know the ACHD working on it, but you in particular, name has come up many, many times. So you've done a fantastic job working on that design and making it go at a very quick pace. All things in greatly appreciated. And Caleb, 100 feet.
Mr. Mayor, we can't hear him online.
Just a little close.
How about that? Got a dead mic. Take this. Sorry. How's that? Okay. To comment to Caleb's point, I think we've been pretty consistent for some time as to this when in doubt for the arterials, trying to preserve 100 feet of right-of-way. The times we've all have stories where there's missed opportunity, and it certainly is a sacrifice and a big stretch at times to be able to do that. But anytime there's an opportunity to get that right-of-way preservation, even if the ultimate construction is something less than, you can go that direction, but you can't go back. And we all have examples where that hasn't worked. So I appreciate you bringing it up again. And I think we've all been consistent from the city that that's our intent, and our baseline ask is the 100 feet right away. It's just better long-term planning. It gives us more options. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Mayor,
Commissioner McKinney.
let me just chime in for a moment. I'm inclined to agree that McMillan is a good example of a place where opportunities were missed. And now, going back and fixing a difficult situation becomes, far more costly, and in some cases really not practically possible. McMillan is a good example. It has a 5-lane section from Eagle Road to Locust Grove, and then it narrows down back to a 2 or 3-lane section for the next, so many miles. And yet those areas are fairly built up. And the majority of the traffic on McMillan, I think, is primarily local traffic. That is to say, it's being generated by the adjacent neighborhoods for the most part. And back in 2018, when I began working on the Meridian Transportation Commission, we were discussing this very subject of, I brought up a concern about why are we only looking at 3 lanes on McMillan and not 5? The statement was made that, well, we've got, Ustick is being expanded and Chinden is being expanded. And once those 2 things are done, you'll see that the traffic will be drawn away from McMillan. And the truth is, it really hasn't been. Both of those are done. And in the AM and PM peaks, McMillan, several miles of it through there is a parking lot during both the morning and evening peaks. And so I'm in agreement, it's all about money. How much money do we have to preserve right-of-way? Again, where you don't preserve it, your options in the future are limited. And where you do, your options are left open. So I'm very much in favor of that to the extent that we can do it. Wherever we can make it financially feasible, we should do it.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
I echo both of your thoughts. Growing up here, I look at this map now. I remember when most of those were 2s. When Eagle Road was 2 lanes. All these roads were very, very small. It was farm roads. I went to high school with kids that got up on the dairy farms, which were our heritage to come to school. Well, that's changed. We've evolved as a community. And I think we are not having enough foresight if we don't reserve that right away on all of these roads now. Or we're going to end up with more issues like what we're trying to decide on Linder Road, on that small stretch, on how to make that work between a new overpass and a new bridge on the river. I think we owe it to the future people sitting in these seats to try to preserve this right away now, to eliminate some of those future problems down the road, trying to deal with how to widen.
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Yep, another echo here. Along with the necessity of preserving the right-of-way, if that's the way we go, which we're really serious about. There are some realities in terms of what's been going on with costs the last decade and what might be going on with costs the next decade. Because as you already know, none of this happens very quickly. And the $5 million miles that we used to have are now 15, in some cases over 20. And that's just been while I've been sitting in my chair. It makes all the inflation numbers that we get fed every month by whatever source look ridiculous. At least our industry does, ridiculously low. And so what we decide to do, as important as that is, one of these days, there will have to be a reckoning in terms of how we tax, how much we take in tax. We won't have the benefit of all this printed money out of thin air in the very near future. And the fact that you guys have given us what you've given is the biggest reason why we were able to take advantage timing-wise, and that ITD was convinced timing-wise of making the Linder Overpass area happen. I was just amazed at how that worked. So when you see some of the areas on McMillan that have that ditch on the north side, knowing that that ditch has to get completely encased, and then a road built on the top of whatever the encasement is. The rest of the east-west corridors are probably going to be developed in light speed compared to what might happen on McMillan. And that's not saying anything negative about our intent. It's just kind of a casting a shadow of reality on some of it. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor, can I just respond to that? And again, I have my counsel here and online, so if I say anything out of turn, you know how to slap me. But I think that is understood, Commissioner Goldthorpe, and I appreciate that. I guess back to even Councilman Overton's comments, we aren't asking for it to be built or anything really done just to preserve it. And I think part of what we've talked about before is land is not going down in cost either, so in price. So, the sooner we can acquire and preserve is going to be cheaper than maybe longer terms when we have to come back and buy, it's encumbered by buildings and parking lots and other things. It's certainly not going to be cheaper then. So that is really the request, is to preserve, figure out design later, maybe the road, maybe we aren't even, tiling the ditch and putting travel lanes over it. There's other options, but again, the starting point, our request is to just preserve the right of way where we can, because again, it's not going to be cheaper in the future, we don't envision, and it leaves the options open for what we can do with that right of way into the future. So I appreciate the comments.
Commissioner Schrader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to echo Dave McKinney's, Commissioner McKinney's comments. As someone that, this is in my district, a big part of this corridor, and it's definitely predominantly local traffic. And I think it's really important for connectivity, for people getting around, and also because that Fields district in the northern part of the city will really be cut off if there isn't good connectivity, especially pedestrian connectivity. And so I totally echo the desire to preserve right away. I think is very smart for us to do and get agreement on. I guess my question is, there were some pilings going in. Does anyone have an update on where we're at with the overpass? And has there been any success in working with ITD to try to, preserve as much as we can? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Hood.
I can address that. Councilwoman Strader, yes, what you see, well, hopefully you can see it online, is what ITD is moving forward with. It is just 80-foot clear. However, we have had some initial conversations with ITD staff, and you can do a constrained corridor. You still can fit 4 lanes and your pedestrian bike facilities, accommodate drainage. It's tight. But this wouldn't necessarily be prohibitive of being widened in the future to be more than the 3 lanes that it's currently being built with. It was just too late in the process to redesign the structure.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple just quick comments and then potentially a question. I want to thank a couple of our highway district commissioners for commenting favorably about this. I think it's really exciting for us in Meridian to see there's at least some open-mindedness to what we're proposing. I think to Councilmember Borton's point, this is a project that nobody that's in this room or virtual will ever be thanked for, right? This is future planning, and by the time we could build this all out, I'm doubtful that any of us will be there to be congratulated. But it's one of those things too that when it happens, both agencies would be really credited with forward thinking. And I think to Commissioner Goldthorpe's point, is as we were doing the last presentation with the calendar of the Linda Road overpass, and that overpass being open potentially in 2027, it kind of fell on me that it's about 10 years from when we really first started talking about that in a joint meeting with the highway district. So it takes a long time to move things forward, but it also goes by quickly. And so maybe to that point, Mr. Mayor, Council President Pickering, or Caleb, what do you envision as kind of the next step, or what would you like to see to keep this conversation moving in a positive direction? Recognizing lots of details to be figured out. We haven't heard from everybody, but I don't want us to let this positive momentum sit idle.
And someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but if we were to update the master street map with this, then as part of the development process, we're able to work with the development community to get that preserved for the future. And it's just, what is the process to go through the master street map update? How often does that occur? I'll turn that to someone that knows.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, so we can suggest that update to the master street map. And Director Wong, I mean, I know we're like out of cycle, but we can make those adjustments if we've got consensus from the commission, of course. Yeah. But I do want to, if I can, Mr. Mayor, respond to Councilman Kavner's point. I think this is a big update aside from your letter. It was very focused on McMillan, so I'm just digesting everything that I'm hearing and processing it all. And all of you are absolutely right that preserving right-of-way, and I think generally, if you listen back to previous commission conversations, we have been very open-minded and looking to the future of preserving right-of-way where and when we can to the most possible. I think the only thing that I'm just kind of thinking about and mulling over is this, and Commissioner Goldthorpe talked about this, is the cost. So, this is going to, along with, and you guys have a lot of widening projects. There's a lot of big impacts that your community is facing, especially with Highway 16. And so these are all very expensive projects, and widening or preserving right-of-way for all of these corridors would be a pretty Herculean task. So I think what I would love to know more, and we could save this for a future conversation, is, there's going to have to be some trade-offs. So is that we would prioritize preserving right-of-way over widening for a year or 2 years, right? Or only these projects, or if we want to preserve certain projects over others, if we need to. I think those are the types of details that we would want to know, so we can give direction to our staff so that they can be expeditious in fulfilling the city's goals and vision for that. But I'm happy to go back to staff, and we can work to update the master street map and bring it up to the commission as soon as possible for a discussion, specifically to McMillan. And then we could have a bigger discussion about all of the arterials and preserving that right-of-way.
Maybe as part of that process, if you can, when I look at the map, I don't know how many areas it actually is going to impact, because you've lost Meridian, you've lost Locust Grove, you've lost a lot of McMillan currently, Victory, Locust Grove. When you get down to it, there may be 7 or 8 miles total that you could actually proactively plan for, areas that haven't already been annexed where the impacts. So if I'm looking at the map correctly, I don't think we're talking about going back to Pine and making Pine 5 lanes. And you can't go back to the other areas and do it through the development process. It's really moving forward. What does that look and feel like? But I could be incorrect in that thought process and concept by just looking at what I see on the map.
Well, Mr. Mayor, if I may, I think that would be something we could have staff look into and provide a bigger update around it. How many actual miles are we talking about? Where is it consolidated? Those types of things. And then I would hope we could still then get your direction after that report is complete.
And maybe part of the concept is we would like to see everything be more than a 3-lane road and preserve in the future where we can. But if we have an opportunity to go back, that we know that's what the hope is in that standpoint. But
Mr. Mayor, for just one minor point, I think, because you hit kind of the clarification, not that it's not insignificant. Every mile is hundreds of thousands, if not millions of more dollars. But Pine is not a section line arterial, so that one off the table, and that would be a mess to try to get the right of way and go down. So that is not part of the request, because that is not a section line arterial. It is an arterial, but it's not on the section line. So you did hit, there are a few corridors and some segments in there. So again, an impact for sure, but it isn't as significant as maybe it could be, because most of them are planned to be at least 5 lanes today.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman.
Yeah, so I'm pleased to
Make it
hear this discussion. I think we should continue it. I know from Boise's standpoint, they have been real insistent. This ultimately is a land use decision. This really is about how you want to use your land. Land use decisions then get made based upon what the configuration of the network is. And we went through a somewhat Herculean task in Boise to try and get the city's land use vision for Warm Springs changed in our master street map, and ultimately did, because that reflects, and it was the other direction. The map said it was going to be 5 lanes and development, and we lost opportunities to put in things like roundabouts and certain things that the developer could have paid for. We lost that opportunity. Now, the features that need to be put in, the taxpayers are going to have to pick up that tab because the developers are done. So it's really important, I think, ACHD respond to the land use priorities of the cities. And if the direction from the city is that we really want these to be mobility corridors every mile, and that affects the land use decisions, and developers will say, well, this is the kind of development I want to put on an arterial, a big arterial, and this is the kind of development I don't want to. People tend not to want to live right next to a really busy arterial, but sometimes you can get businesses. So it varies, but that's a land use decision, and I think that's really important. And so that's the way I would go. I know Boise has some priorities. We've actually pushed to have the master street map updated based upon the city's priorities, not waiting for development. And so when the city comes in and says, I want to have these changes made, Eagle came in and we made some changes. Boise's come in, we've made some changes. CUNA, so Meridian is the same. We want to make sure that it reflects the current vision of each of the land use agencies. And it's a very different vision from the areas. We have arterials, we have 2- and 3-lane arterials in the area I represent, which will never be enlarged. Boise Avenue, Hill Road, parts of Maple Grove, parts of 5 Mile, that the city will never want to expand out. They don't see them as mobility corridors, they see them as drawing neighborhoods. They want to see more investment on a neighborhood level. And so it's a different kind of vision for that area. And so I think it's critical that ACHD follow the land use vision of the neighborhoods in each of the cities that we cover. And if that's the direction that Meridian wants to go, obviously, you have to realize, when you expand a road, you expand a road. Eagle Road gave us a good lesson. We thought, well, going to a bunch of lanes means it'll move really fast. Well, you can't widen yourself out of congestion. We're going to have congestion on 5-lane roads and 7-lane roads. We're just going to have it. Because most of the western part of the Treasure Valley is built for dependence on motor vehicles. And Highway 16 is going to increase the amount of congestion that's going to be on Franklin and on Ustick. It's just going to happen because that's the way in which, that's the direction we're going. But, if this is a priority for the city of Meridian, I think we should, and that's a specific decision that's been made by the representatives of the city, just as I hope that ACHD always respects the priorities of the other cities.
Thank you. Maybe just 2 cents, and I don't disagree with anything you said because I think it all is interconnected and relevant. I think if well before I think most of us were here and decisions were made on Meridian Road only needed to be 3 lanes because of the land use around it. I think what I would suggest is in Meridian, from what I see, land use doesn't dictate traffic anymore. It's, especially when we are a through destination for many, whether it's to go to Eagle Road for what it offers or people going to work, we just have people driving on all the roads all the time, going in every direction, no matter where you live. And the land use decisions to try to adjust to the roadside probably had some challenges, and that viewpoint at one point was probably the right thing that was talked about, but the outcome 20 years later is just different because it's not how they choose to drive. They see section line road, it's going to be great for 2 miles and it drops down to 1, and that's the way they're going to go to get that faster 2 miles. And so I think it's commuters' patterns, which are impacting everything as much as land use anymore, personally. I don't have anything to back that up, not a land use person, but land use, I don't think, did us great in making decisions for 3-lane roadways 25 years ago. Yes, more to come, right? Okay. All right, thank you, Caleb. So with that, we'll move on to item 3, which is the integrated 5-year work plan.
go grab it. Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor, Madam President. I always said the opposite. Council members and our commission. So my name is Christy Enselman. I'm the planning supervisor at Ada County Highway District. And it is under our group that we develop the integrated 5-year work plan every year. It's an annual update. And so I'm just here as kind of the kickoff, the integrated 5-year work plan to, believe it or not, the 25 to 29 integrated 5-year work plan. We recently just did our kickoff in December. We did an outreach to all of our partner agencies on provided them updated lists. So in this presentation, I'm going to kind of go over what was adopted as part of the 24 to 28 integrated 5-year work plan, and then some highlights of the process coming up for the next 25 to 29. It feels like it's a circular process, and we're always working on it, which is absolutely true. So the next few slides are just going to be some highlights of the projects in the city of Meridian that are programmed for construction. I specifically am pulling out just construction years. So for 24, and I won't necessarily go through each and every one of these, although I'll hit some of the highlights. So for 2024 projects in North Meridian, we have several maintenance projects coming your way and a bikeway signage. Meridian South has some bigger items that are coming up that are both, that are City of Meridian. So of Eagle, Lake Hazel to Amity will start construction this year, as well as the intersection at Lake Hazel and Eagle. We also have Lake Hazel State Highway 16, or sorry, State Highway 69, because I can't read. Meridian Road to Locust Grove. That is one that is a cooperative development project that we're doing. It's kind of nice when we can get those done through the development, large developments happening in the area, and we can kind of accelerate some of those projects. Lake Hazel, Eagle to Locust Grove was another project, and that intersection was another cooperative development project. In 2025, we have some big projects coming up. You'll start seeing in 25 those projects that are tied to the Highway 16, State Highway 16 project being accelerated, finally coming into construction years. So we have Ustick and Black Cat intersection, Ustick Black Cat's 10 mile, as well as Lake Hazel, Eagle to Cloverdale projects. So all of the, well, that's not a Highway 16, but though just highlighting some of the big projects that are coming in 25. 26, we have quite a few projects. These are in more of our out years of our program. So some of these years are over programmed. Every year we update an integrated 5-year work plan. The first 2 years are tied directly to our budget. So this next iteration, it'll be 25 and 26 will be tied directly to our budget. So in the out years, we tend to over program a little bit so that we can be flexible to additional funding sources that may come our way. Highway 16 funds are an example of that. Strategic funds are examples of that. So some of these are with a little bit of an eye of they may not stay in that year, but that's what they're currently sitting at. We always try to move projects forwards as we go along. Projects in 2027, again, here's the ones that have dedicated funding like the Highway 16 projects, those we intend to keep on that track. So we have Ustick and McDermott, that section for Ustick, Owyhee Storm to Black Cat, that's the section that will be widened out to the high school that's out there. And here's some 28. So as you guys can see, there's quite a few projects coming to the city of Meridian. There's a lot going on, a lot of very large projects coming into the city of Meridian. These are pulled directly from the integrated 5-year work plan sheets. We do divide our sheets up by neighborhood planning area. It just makes it a little bit more digestible to the public because most of the people from the public, they want to know what's happening near them. So we've divided them up that way, and the icons you see on the screen, that's on those sheets, identifies what components are going with those projects if you're not familiar with our sheets. So PED, ADA, bike, vehicular capacity, and maintenance are how we break those up. And then a whole bunch of projects sitting in future. So I didn't count them all up, but I think we have over 100 to 150 projects in the city of Meridian currently in the integrated 5-year work plan. Another component that we look at when we're developing the integrated 5-year work plan, so every single year we also do what's called a scoping effort. So before a project can be added into the integrated 5-year work plan, it needs to be evaluated for feasibility. Can the project actually be constructed? What components need to be in it? Sometimes we will get a request for just sidewalk. But then we look at that project more holistically. Is it just is it sidewalk? Is it maintenance? Is it pedestrian crossing? Is it adding capacity? So we look at it more holistically. So these are projects that we have in our fiscal year 24 scoping effort. We scope approximately 50 to 60 projects each year. Some are, we need to get a much better idea of what the cost estimate is going to be of a project. It may have been something that was in our 2020 CIP, where we had a very high level cost estimate and not drill down into the specifics, bridges, crossings, all of that, those lovely components. So the scoping allows us to do a deeper dive and get a much more dialed in cost estimate. So you'll see on this list, there are some that are already in the plan, but we need a more detailed cost estimate and to kind of suss out some of the improvements that also need to go with it. And then I always like to throw a little bit of looking into the future. So when we're developing the integrated 5-year work plan, as projects are completed, we're moving new projects in. So some of the things that we're looking in Meridian, so there's a bevy of locations that we look for new projects that come into the integrated 5-year work plan. You see at the top of that list is the City of Meridian prioritization list. So these are just some, and these are not holistic. These are not the only projects. These are just some to give you an idea of what we look at when we're updating the integrated 5-year work plan. So we look at the list that the City of Meridian provides to us as what their priorities are. We look at the CIP, which is your major arterial intersections and roadways, and what we're showing a forecasted need as coming in. You can see there's several on Black Cat, Amity, Cherry, that in the current integrated 5-year work plan, it's showing a forecasted need of 2031 to 2035. So we're going to start looking at an eye on those potentially coming into the program. And also neighborhood plans. So when I had said that we divide the entire county up into a neighborhood planning area, that's also tied to another effort that we do is we go out to the public and ask them what their needs are in those communities. It's a big deeper dive. We get a really great long list of projects that people would like to see in their area. So we do pull projects from there as well. And they do get ranked high, medium, and low. Which ones are high priorities, which are low. And see, these are some examples. And you'll see like what we're looking at. So even some of the ones that are neighborhood plan projects, they still need to be scoped. We still need to do a deeper dive before they could be actually added into the integrated 5-year work plan. And my last slide here is kind of, this is a schedule of this year's integrated 5-year work plan. As I said, we did an outreach to all of our partner agencies back in December. We sent letters out to all of our partners, which are the 6 cities, the school districts, VRT, and BSU, where we reach out, ask for what your priorities are as an organization, and that helps us in better understanding what the needs of your community are. So we did that in December. We also launched our public outreach tool to the public of Ada County to see what public projects that they would like to recommend to you and to us. That tool to date, we launched it on January 9th and it goes through February 9th. To date, we have over 500 new project requests and we have over 1,000 page views. Last year we did a similar effort. This one we try to tailor it a little bit more because the public said they wanted more information. So we're getting a lot of really great feedback on existing projects as well as potential future projects that we haven't identified as of yet. So the partner agencies, we are asking that all of our partner agencies provide their prioritization lists by March 15th. All of your staff are wonderful to work with and they've been hard at work. I just talked to Caleb this evening, so we're very excited to see those lists. And those tie into, we take all of the partner agency requests and we put them through our industry leading prioritization methodology, and that helps us even get a better understanding of which projects potentially would be added to the plan. And their road intersections are prioritized differently than community programs projects. So we look at, is it tied directly to a school? Is it part of a school walk route? Those get higher points in our methodology than say, 100 foot of sidewalk that doesn't tie into a school or isn't part of a walk route. Is it on the partner agency's priority list? If you guys say it's a priority, that project gets a lot more
points to it. If it's part of a transportation dependent community where a large percentage, they don't drive, they walk or they bike, that gets a higher percentage. And this is just under community programs prioritization. So we will be doing that as soon as we receive your requests. And it takes us about 2 months to do that process because we will not prioritize every single project. I'll say right now. We have thousands of projects that have come to us with needs throughout Ada County. So we 100% will be prioritizing all of the partner agency requests. So everything you guys give us will be prioritized against ones we already have in the queue, as well as all the other partner agencies. So it helps us see across county-wide what's rising to the top. And then moving forward just through the process in July is when we will release the initial draft of the integrated 5-year work plan that goes back out to our partners. There's another opportunity for our partners to give us feedback on what we've developed. Do we miss a mark? Are there things you'd like to see accelerated? With the goal of an adoption at the end of September. So there's, as you can see from this short little slide, there's a lot of opportunities to be involved in that process. And that is all I have for you this evening because we're getting a deep dive into it. We don't have a lot of details for you yet. So that's why we focused on the 24 to 28. But I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Christy. Caleb, do you want to just quickly chime in where we are in the city so council knows?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure the ACHD commissioners have heard some version of that before. So yeah, to our council and kind of where we're at in this process. A working group of the Transportation Commission actually met last Monday and have put forward their draft recommended changes and additions and subtractions to the list of priority projects for this next year, both programmed and unprogrammed. That will go to the Transportation Commission. They have a meeting this upcoming Monday, so a week from today. And then shortly thereafter, I'll work with Mayor's Chief of Staff, Council President Borton, on getting that on a work session on one of council agendas, probably mid to late February, certainly to meet the March 15th deadline that ACHD has imposed on all the cities and other partner agencies. Maybe just one more point of to help advertise for those that may be listening to this, or if you as individuals want to go on to the ACHD website, you can still participate for another 10 days or so. So just go to ACHD's website and you can just search for the integrated 5-year work plan. You can go to review on their public outreach map. You can rank identified projects. You can read more about the projects identified. You can also drop a pin. Christy mentioned this, but there's a new project suggestion link that you can also click if you want to add to the list of 1,000 or however many you have so far. You can review the ones that are already there or add your new ones too. So just go to ACHD's website sometime in the next 10 days if you want to review what's there or add. Thank you.
We have just over or under 600 comments so far on that map. And it's part of our Engage tool as well. So because we have people that subscribe to the ACHD Engage page. And so when we first launched this, we sent an email to over 9,000 subscribers asking them to participate. We also do social media outreach. We work with our partners. We send a media toolkit out to all of our partners if they want to put it on their website to show that link. Several of them have done that. And we love to get those comments. And it's kind of fun because on where you drop a pin for a new project, everybody that has dropped a pin, anybody can go in and see it. So you can go see what your neighbors have dropped and what comments they've had. So you can even go on and comment and say, yeah, that's great. We love this. This is a great idea. So we found it to be a very, very useful tool in helping us develop the plan to be the best that it can be. So.
Thank you. Question?
Mayor?
Mr. Mayor.
Commission President Pickering.
Yeah, thank you, Caleb, for that plug. I want to just highlight, if you haven't been on the new website, please visit. It's lovely. And then also just that feature is so intuitive. We hadn't offered that drop a new pin on a separate clean map previously. So it kind of was a little bit confusing for folks that aren't engaging in our website really frequently. So really suggest that you all take a peek at that. And as Christy talked about, we have a new feature on our website where you can actually subscribe to projects in in these particular locations. We'll give you guys updates on all different phases of those projects. And I think that's going to be a great way for not only public to be abreast of what's going on, but also you guys as well, and knowing what's going on in your district. And our communications team has done a fabulous job trying to reach people where they're at and make sure that they know everything that's going on in their neighborhood and the broader community and all different types of projects. They can self-select all of those features.
And Madam President, just one more plug on that tool. We did just recently, because I am that way sometimes. I'm not the most tech savvy when it comes to things. And we do have some of our community members that aren't. So we just launched, I believe it went live on the page today. We did a video tutorial as well, and our wonderful communications team put that there to help guide you through how to use that tool. So we have a lot of great things on that page. So we're pretty excited.
Commissioner Hanson.
So, Mr. Mayor, Madam President, I just want to reiterate that this is really important to the priorities of the cities. It's all about trips. There's a lot of times you will find, and that's why I love that you're represented by districts, because you have that much more familiarity with neighborhoods, that people would make a trip, would walk someplace if a certain sidewalk is filled, or if a certain crosswalk is safer for their kids or to go to this school. But that kind of detail about. In areas where there's also homeowners or neighborhood associations, the neighborhood associations are all out there saying, get your information in. And HOAs, we treat the same way. So even if there may not be a neighborhood association. So use your networks now and tell them, go in, tell me, is there a place where you just as soon would prefer to walk to a coffee shop or to a park? What is theirs about the right-of-way that makes it dangerous? So that, the area I represent, there's a real high priority of try and get as many trips to be shorter or by other means than car, because one more car just means more congestion. And so when we can do that by the investment of a crosswalk or by the filling of sidewalk gaps, and I must say a lot have, under the leadership of Commissioner Goldthorpe, we've got a lot more sidewalk gaps we've filled over the last 10 years because it's like, let's fill these things, because they were left out when the development happened years and years ago. So there's that opportunity to do that, to try and make those trips, multimodal trips, work for people. And not every single trip has to be by car. And it just pays off in the long run. And then once we also have this, we haven't mentioned it, we have this philosophy that we want to be one and done. If we can get all of these ideas on, and sometimes it takes years, we can get it all done, a crosswalk, a new pavement, a couple of other things, get it done, and we don't have to go back to that again, and that concrete's there for another 100 years.
Any additional questions or comments?
Mayor.
Councilman Morton.
Christie, I've got a question for you. The 5-year work plan, which our staff and our commission, we work really hard to provide that input, because we appreciate the ask and the ability to weigh heavily on what is a priority in Meridian. But to the earlier discussion and Commission President Pickering's comments about trade-offs made me wonder. I seem to recall the 5-year work plan most often tethers right-of-way acquisition, right, immediately preceding construction, relatively speaking. So a question maybe for you or maybe for the commissioners, is that close connection driven purely based on budget, or it seems as though if there's an opportunity to do right-of-way acquisition well before construction, is it a philosophy to connect those closely, or a philosophy to not allow right-of-way acquisition to occur 6, 8, 10 years prior to construction?
Mr. Mayor, Madam President, Councilmember Borton. So we get right-of-way through a variety of ways. So when a development comes through, that's going to precede, a lot of times that might precede us widening a roadway. And so part of their requirement is to dedicate that right of way. So we get it then. And then when we're actually working a project through the integrated 5-year work plan, when we have designs for that project, we want to continue moving that project forward. And sometimes right of way can take a while. Right now it's taking us on average for most of our projects about 1.5 years. And we don't want a big gap between the design being done and then acquiring right of way, because they're tied very directly. So we know we're only taking as much right of way as what we exactly need to construct that project and not more. And so we want them to follow very closely. If there's we will sometimes, sometimes there may be a gap, and you'll see that with a 5-year work plan. There may be a gap with getting the design done, getting the right of way acquired, and then construction. Because a lot of times that's the biggest dollar amount that we're trying to work within. So you will sometimes see a gap of 1 year or 2, but we generally try to get that right of way as closely to design as we possibly can. Because again, prices do keep increasing on property. So we try to get as quickly as we can. And if we see opportunities in other avenues to purchase right of way ahead of time, we do, if we know it's going to be a large buyout. But for the most part, that's how we're acquiring the right of way. I hope that answers your question. Okay.
Any additional questions, Commissioner Goldthorpe?
Comment, actually, thanks. I'm used to seeing green lights and red lights, and mostly red for me. But anyhow, sometimes when, and I'll use Victory Middle School for an example on Stoddard Road, you know, that's being designed, it's been designed. There's been all kinds of really good public input, but it's to be determined as far as when it gets built. But in the middle of all of the process, we found out how unsafe the intersection there was in front of the middle school on Stoddard. And so we went out and took a look at it. I was there, watched the cross guard go flying into the bushes instead of getting killed, and it was a mess. And so we immediately, in a very rapid fashion, made some changes to that intersection so that it was safer. And that'll continue to happen without going into the 5-year work plan.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
Yeah, I was gonna just ask a quick question, which is, you know, we put a ton of work into the pedestrian safety task force, and just want to understand how we're using that to prioritize our community projects, or how that will integrate into the plans going forward from both sides.
Mr. Hood.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Councilwoman Strader, I can update you on that. I've actually had conversations with a handful of staff over the last couple of weeks. Honestly, most of those projects will probably not be routed through ACHD's integrated 5-year work plan. I think some of them are going to be maintenance. Some of them are going to be code enforcement type of requests. Some of them through Ryan Head and the leading pedestrian interval program that's already in process. So not really through what Christie's talking about and capital projects. Most of those recommendations there are ancillary, and Mr. Miles and myself and others are still trying to kind of figure that out, where they may go. Maybe it's police and enforcement, maybe it's again maintenance here or code enforcement. But again, to answer your question more directly, not a lot of the recommendations in that report are likely to be included. Now, there are some upgraded crossings and intersection improvements that are on the list and are being considered, and you will see. But those are fewer than you may have thought or expected through the integrated 5-year work plan.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilwoman Schrader.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I mean, I think my main emphasis is just to make sure we're not losing sight of the work, and that the follow-up is happening, whether it's the city of Meridian needs to upgrade our streetlights at an intersection, or whether it's ACHD, we believe needs to put in a crosswalk, whatever it is. I just want to make sure that the ownership is there, and that it's being kind of handled through the appropriate channels. That's all. And I just wanted to make one comment, which was, you know, I do feel like our agencies are working together really closely, and that we are communicating a lot more than we had in previous councils and previous ACHD commissions. And I just want to compliment both agencies and ACHD in particular for keeping the lines of communication way open and listening a lot more to what cities need. I appreciate that.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Rudd.
Just to sort of echo those comments, and thank Councilwoman Strader for her involvement and leadership. Councilman Overton, President Pickering was part of that, the MIPS, what we love affectionately refer to as the MIPS. And we will be reaching out to, again, ACHD with some of these kind of ancillary requests that came about from that study. But I do appreciate those lines of communication and involvement from ACHD staff and our police department and others, the school district and Compass. And I really do think that that effort, there's some good things that came about in that report and next steps. And I'm hopeful that other cities maybe follow the lead and look at doing something very similar. So I know when we set out, that was kind of one of the goals, was something that can be repeatable in other communities, not just Meridian. We're not the only ones in the county with these similar types of issues. So anyways, thank you for all that were part of that already and going forward too.
And just to reiterate, anything that needs to be, if it's a 5-year work-related project or whatnot, we'll put it there. Otherwise, you could see it through the budget from the city if it's a project that it should be our responsibility or it's nebulous. So it's not forgotten. They're moving forward, and as necessary, we'll be seeing them integrated. Okay, right. Thank you, Christy. So up next will be the update on the County Highway District Ustick Road facility. And just if I can, since we were just talking as you come forward, just kind of related to our last conversation, I just want to do a public shout out to Dave Miles. Just this last week and our Parks Department, we were able to get the connection made to Mary McPherson through the Simplot property. So we now have a pathway connection that allows the school district to have a way to not have to bus people within that square mile should they choose to go that direction. But we do have a safe connection to Mary McPherson after, well, I mean, how long has the school been there? Like a long time, but a safe walkway to the school now. So thank you, Dave, for your diligence in working with Simplot and the irrigation district, the school, Parks Department to help make that happen.
Hi.
Hello.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Madam President, council members, commission. Jennifer Behringer, for the record, Deputy Director of Maintenance for Ada County Highway District. Do we have slides? Did they get sent? We might not have sent the slides. No worries, no worries. So I'll just give a quick update on the development of the Ustick Yard on Ustick. So things are going really well, actually. So we are currently at our 60% design on development of that yard, and we're going to be hitting our 100% design in May of this year. We have it phased out, so there's a 7-year build timeline once we break ground, and breaking ground will be around July of this year. And then phased build for 7 years to completion, estimated around 2031. Everything with the Ustick Road widening is also on track. We're currently in design, in right-of-way procurement for the Ustick Yard. So we had it tied in the DA that the road widening would happen in advance of the yard being built out. We're looking for the slides. There really are some cool slides, so it would be good. Okay, I'll just keep going. Yep. Ustick Road widening is going to be going out for bid later this year. They're already in right away going out for bid. So construction should begin late this year, early next year, with a completion in late 25, early 26. As you may recall from previous presentations, we're building up the Ustick Yard with all aspects of our maintenance. So one of the critical factors now that we're in winter, knowing that we'll have a faster timeline for winter response, but all areas of maintenance will be represented there. So we'll have street sweepers, our decant facility and drainage trucks, as well as full service fleet shop as well. So the benefits are that we're building to the need of the community that we have right now and expanding for our future growth. What we know as the county is growing, we're growing in that direction as well. So having our footprint there will reduce our response timelines for maintenance operations. We did receive design approved by Meridian Planning Division in November of 2023. I'll kind of flip through the slides since I'm going out of order here. This is the USIG maintenance complex, the full view of our 3D rendering. So it's very cool. We've got what you're seeing in the foreground is the administrative building. And then we're fully fencing the maintenance complex. And behind that, multiple buildings such as our fleet operations, our broom shed, drainage shed, decant facility, and tucked all the way back in the corner is the salt shed and a few ancillary buildings. I kind of talked to this already, what buildings we're putting in and the benefit to the community. Okay, and this is the slide I was just talking to. So design was approved by Planning Division in November. The pathway on the north end of the property is progressing very well. The bulk of the pathway is complete and they're just working toward the bridge placement that's going over the 5 Mile Canal. We're at 60%. We'll be hitting our 100% in May and groundbreaking in July of this year. This chart would have been very difficult for me to talk to without having the chart. But this is for the current integrated 5-year work plan, and it shows all the road projects. And it's been said multiple times, we go in once. Councilmember Strader asked about pedestrian projects. What I really wanted to show on this slide is everything feeding together. Where the little orange spot is where the yard is, but there are multiple roadway projects. 3 main segments that I've listed on the top and the dates of those design right away and construction years. And then on the bottom, all of those blocks correspond to the circles on the map. And those are intersections or pedestrian crossings or bridges. So there is a lot going on this corridor for improvement. And everything's really tied together. And then my final slide really with the bulk of the information is to talk about how this, and I've said this before, it's a multi-yard phased approach. So not only are we doing the USTIC yard, ACHD is also in the midst of developing our Franklin Traffic Operations Center. We're working on our Apple maintenance yard, and then there's everything that's going on with the Adams maintenance yard, where the goal is we're moving out of the Adams yard to the Apple yard. So as we're looking at all of those pieces and parts, making sure they all flow together and the timelines kind of line up. And budget is going to be a big piece of this. So as we go into our 60%, we'll get a better fidelity on what our budget's going to look like, and we'll have a little bit better idea of the timeline on how construction is going to plan out. Because building 2 yards, 3 yards really with the Franklin yard all simultaneously, we've got to take those steps in a metered approach. And there's the summary. So everything's currently in design. 100% is just on the horizon in May. And we're doing a 7-year phased build out. Originally when I presented, it was an 8 year. So we've been able to compress that a little bit. And then our USTIC road widening is all on track as well. So with that, I will stand for any questions.
Thank you. Council, Commission, questions, comments?
Mr. Mayor?
Commissioner President Pickering?
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to Jennifer and her team. I think if you remember a few years back when this was on your agenda, couple of your concerns were obviously USTIC, but also to make sure that our yard is complementary to the neighborhood and the corridor that it's going to be occupying. So I hope that you all are pleased with that, because we have made some substantial efforts to align with how you guys want to see it along the corridor there. And it's been such a great process that we've applied similar thoughts to the rest of our yards that are coming on deck. So just wanted to say thank you for your leadership and support for this important project. And I just want to double down on Jennifer's piece, you know, with obviously the snow operations and the last few of events, you can tell how important it is that we have these yards fully functional so that when we have events like that, that we're not compromised. And by having this bigger yard that's closer to home to you guys, we can have that improved response rate and have additional equipment to service Meridian. So it's a big piece of this bigger puzzle, and I'm really pleased with how it's coming along.
Mr. Mayor?
Commissioner McKinney.
Jennifer, just a clarification, I think it's worth pointing out, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that this Ustick Maintenance Yard doesn't have direct access onto Ustick Road. Instead, it only has access onto Naomi Drive.
Naomi
So
Drive,
it's-
right, and we're
Its
doing.
access to Ustick will be through the signalized intersection that's being
That is correct.
put in there. Okay. And I think that's, I think that's a relevant point because it'll have a big effect on the functioning, or at least that has an effect on the functioning of Ustick Road. One question I have with regard to the timing of the project, you've given us the date for when it's going to be complete, but correct me if I'm wrong, is it going to begin functioning before it's fully complete? Instead, isn't there a date before then when it will begin operations, and when's that going to be?
Yes, council members, Commissioner, we can have initial operations at an earlier date. It's our focus on the front end is going to be building the decamp facility and the salt and sand operations for winter operations. So we will have the capability to operate out of the yard at an earlier time. It's not an all and done. So since we have kind of a phased approach at which buildings are going to be coming, we put a priority on the things that we know we need to get out here to Meridian first, and we will have those initial operations as early as 2027, I think we'll be able to have that. So building the decamp facility, 25, 26, and then being able to have those pieces and parts, early operations in 2027.
And so the first operations that will work out of that yard will be the snow removal operations? Is that kind of what's
Decant is a really critical piece of it. I would say being able to have our sweeper operations move into there and use the decant, but then quickly following that would be the winter operations.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Board.
Jennifer, prior to that, though, if I recall, the Ustick Road improvements, and in particular, the deceleration lane on the north side heading west, that's done prior to.
Yes,
Yeah.
so in 2025, when the construction really kicks off for that segment, the deceleration lane is built into that project.
And if I could just add, I think that I want to say thank you to ACHD on the corridor out to Owyhee. I mean, that's really, someone who lives south at near Mountain View, and to finally get that road completed many years after that school. And this is actually coming light years ahead compared to, you use that as a comparison point in life, but the rate the Owyhee high school basketball team is performing, people are going to be flocking out there, and they do it at night in the wintertime when the roads are challenging, and to have that improvement will just hopefully make that a safer experience for all going out that direction. And it's tying into Highway 16 when it's built is just going to enhance to that corridor. So we appreciate it. I appreciate it. I assume everyone else here does as well, to help get to that important connection point in our community. All right. Thank you very much. We've reached the end of our agenda. Is there anything else for the good of the order? If not, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Mayor, I move we adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.